Okay, so we will start with our history discussion. In this session, what we will do is we will try to complete the modern India part. Okay, so whatever is possible in 2 days, we will try to do that. Impossible it is for me to cover entire history like the way we used to do in the class and all. So I'll touch upon all the important areas, and that will give you a clue that where you need to focus more and what you need to read more. Okay, so I'm expecting that you will be in a position to appreciate that in 2 days there will be obvious limitation. Guys, if possible we can extend it to the 26th as well if possible, but I'll try to finish it off the important areas from today and also tomorrow, and then we will have a test and we'll have a discussion. Okay, if possible I'll try to keep a session on 26th as well for this, because most of you are already from the mentoring participants, so hardly 3 or 4 are from the webinar participants. So you can also come to that, and we will have a session on 26th as well. Okay, so here what I'll do is I'll start with 1773 onwards. Before that, I'm not discussing. In fact, I have updated in the webinar that portal what is available in the website. It is updated, and for others I will be sharing the video. You already have my complete videos and classes. So the decline of Mughal part I'm not discussing here. Battle of Plassey we are not discussing. This Carnatic wars and all we are not discussing. I will be starting from 1773 onwards, like proper British administration onwards, like regulating act onwards. Okay, so we will start with 1773. Then we normally I used to discuss all the governor generals in class in the order, but what we do here, we will discuss. I may be discussing in the scattered form also. It is not necessary that we will follow the order, but it is just like it as a take it as a revision, or take it like guiding you that you need to focus more on these areas. Okay, so so if you see, we will start with the regulating act. I'm not going to write anything here like as I used to do that. But here I will be only focusing on, discussing with you, so that, we don't want to waste the time in writing and everything. Okay. So I request all of you to keep the video off and the mic in a mute position. So we start with 1773 Regulating Act, the first one and the most important one. Okay, so what is the first provision in 1773 Regulating Act? The first provision with respect to Regulating Act, if you see, till then there were governors, right? Governors for Bombay, Madras, and Bengal. So in 1773 Regulating Act, what happened is the governor of Bengal became Governor General of Bengal. So that's the first change. But guys, again, even though he made it as like Governor General of Bengal, if you see Lakshmikant and all, they have given so many provisions. We are not going to each and everything. I'll discuss only the important ones. Then with that knowledge, just look into that. Okay. So even though Governor General is there, some of the books will tell you that he is now superior over the others, and the centralization tendency starts from here. Okay, centralization tendency will start from here, and it will be complete during the time of Bentinck, when the position of Governor General of India will be created, and all those things is there. But again, when it comes to Governor General of Bengal, not much superiority is there, especially in the internal matters. When it comes to the internal matters, the governor of Bombay, the governor of Madras, they had the same control and same say like they used to have before. Only when it comes to external matters. External matters means what? Like war treaty, peace treaty, etc. If you need to sign, then in case if there is a difference of opinion between the governor general and the governor, then the governor general will have a final say. So I repeat, it is only in case of external affairs, okay, external issues, not for internal aspect. Internal aspect, the governors enjoys the same autonomy, same power, and the governor general have no role or to interfere in the internal aspect. It is the same. Okay, there is no change, but that will change later. Legislative power and everything will be given at the central level later, especially during the time of William Bentinck. So you can say to an extent the centralization tendency is starting here, and that will be, at its peak during William Bentinck time. Okay, that anyway we are proceeding further, and you will come to that. So that is the first one. But along with Governor General of Bengal, now they have introduced 4 council members. Guys, this name is itself is what? Regulating Act. Now who's going to regulate whom? It is a question, right? The parliament is going to regulate the company. Now, the parliament is going to regulate the company through whom? These four council members now. So, Governor General will be assisted by four council members, or you can say Governor General in council. Like, that's the main executive, right? That, like, almost the Council of Ministers now. That's the main executive who take and implement decisions is what? The Governor General in council. So here you can see Governor General who will be the head of the company. So head of the company will be appointed by whom? The company itself. So the Governor General will be appointed by the company, and these four members
Is it audible now? Is it audible? Yes, you can turn on your mic also, guys. Now, can you tell me what all things I've discussed so far? Was that audible to you, or you were not able to listen to anything that I've discussed so far? Or the problem came just now? Pushkar?
Sir, just now.
Just now. So whatever I have discussed so far, it was clear to all of you, right? Mosum?
So till four council members.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah. So we were discussing about four council members. Okay. Now, okay, guys. So who was the first Governor General? Warren Hastings. So just note down the. It is there anyway. You will be following the Lakshmikant or whatever materials, guys. Just stick to Modern India, NCERT, and Spectrum. That's enough. Okay. And for these acts, if you need, go with Polity Lakshmikant. There it will be more clear. But he have added more provisions which will make you confused, which is not required from exam point of view. But still, stick to this rather than reading 2, 3, 4 books like shifting to modern India, shifting from this Lakshmi, Bibin Chandra to Spectrum to different other books. That's not desirable. That's not required. So old NCERT will be fine. It's okay, old or new, but old NCERT will be fine because it is history. So old is better anyway. Okay. So here, what you need to know is the Warren Hastings was the Governor General. Then the four members. Who are the four members? Just take down. Since these are the first time, they will ask you which among the following or who among the following were the members of the first executive council or the council. Okay. So Governor General in council, they will take the important decision, and the decisions will be taken on the basis of majority. What does that mean? Governor General alone cannot take decision. They need majority. Majority means if the Governor General want to do something, he need at least the support of two. And guys, that's exactly the problem with this one. Since they are in need of majority to implement any of the decision, these four members who came from England, who were appointed by the parliament, were never in support of Warren Hastings. In fact, the interesting reason is when they came to India, they were not welcomed properly by the Governor General. And that is the reason why they were never ready to follow these Governor General. Okay. And the four members were Richard Barwell, Philip Francis, George Monson, John Clavering. Just note down these four members. So you need to know very clearly Richard Barwell, Philip Francis, George Monson, and John Clavering. Four members. Okay. So Warren Hastings, Governor General, four members, Richard Barwell, Philip Francis, George Monson, and John Clavering. So five. So three is the majority, and then only you can take the decision. And the most important problem with respect to this regulating act the company faced is with respect to this majority. They were not able to implement any of the decision. Okay, so this is about the first one, Governor General plus four. Okay, and it should be based on majority. And the second one is related to Supreme Court. There has to be a Supreme Court to be established. Okay, so the act is in 1773, Regulating Act, and the Supreme Court established in 1774, where in Calcutta. But guys, this Supreme Court is not similar to the modern day Supreme Court. This is entirely different. This Supreme Court was established only for the trial of Europeans, because when they came to India, the Indian laws and the European laws are totally different. So they consider Indian laws as traditional, orthodox, and they don't want their case to be tried under Indian law. So this Supreme Court is basically to try or the trial of the Europeans under European law, not under the Indian law. Okay, only for Europeans. And the first Chief Justice of this Supreme Court was Justice Elijah Impe. Okay, so other than there are many provisions are there, but not that concerned about that. Okay, but this two is more important, so I'll be discussing about this. Okay, then now Warren Hastings rule is starting, but there is nothing much to discuss during Warren Hastings time with respect to prelims perspective. There can be questions in mains, but we are not venturing or getting into that at this point of time. Like Warren Hastings period in history is known as trial and error period. So we are not, going to that answer and all at this point of time. Maybe one more question which can be asked from prelims is related to like, during this time when he came to India, then when they started this administration, they should be knowing India properly, right? Like if you need to take administration, if you need to do it properly, you need to have a control over the law and order and also the legal system as well as the revenue system. So proper legal knowledge should be there. Legal system has to be in your control. Revenue collection also should be in your control. And in India, what type of revenue collected? Mainly from land revenue, agriculture, right? So agriculture dominated economy. So there was a system like Lagan and all, but they had no clue about that. No clue about the revenue system in India. Similarly, legal system also, they had not much idea, like even though in criminal cases, we followed some uniformity, like the laws which were set by the Mughals, which were partly Islamic and partly local, which is based on the Turkish law. Mughals, they used to follow, uniform law for the criminal cases, but in civil cases, right? What do you mean by civil cases? Like even now also this uniform civil code and all, that is a discussion, right? So when we talk about civil cases, it's like marriage, adoption, property. Guys, even then, even now also, if you look into civil cases can be divided into different categories. And most of the civil cases like property transfer and all, there is a uniform law. Only some cases like marriage, divorce and all, the uniformity is not there, which is based on religion. So that is what we are actually demanding for this uniform civil code, which is there in your DPSP. But when I'm discussing in this context, the point which I'm telling you is the Britishers had not much idea about the legal system and also revenue system. So they need to know India if they need to administer India properly. And if you need to know India, you have to study India. So during this time, you will see the new branch of knowledge coming. What is that? Indology. Indology literally means study of India. Okay, so now you have decided that you're going to study India, and how you're going to study India? Through the religious textbooks, archaeological excavations, etc. That's what Indology. So new branch of knowledge emerged during this time. Okay, so the objective is basically to study India, to know India. That's the purpose. And mainly the initial Indologists were British administrators or British scholars. And what they do, they will always try to justify their rule in India. So what they do, they will try to highlight the bad aspects of Indian society, like they totally maligned India. They were saying that Indian society is very traditional, very orthodox, and the role of British in India is to civilize India or to modernize India, the so-called white man's burden. Okay, so that's about this Indology, but some works are important here. Like in 1776, the first translation happened. What is that? In terms of Code of Jendu laws or Jendu Code. This was asked before in prelims. What is Jendu Code or Code of Jendu laws? It is Manusmriti was translated to English. Okay, so that's I've told you it is all about translation. Read the books Sanskrit to English, like that you translate. So Hindu religious scriptures and all you will translate so that you will have the better knowledge about the system. So Manusmriti was translated to Code of Jendu laws in 1776. Similarly, with respect to Muslims or Islam, 1781, they started a madrasa in Calcutta, known as Calcutta Madrasa. So the purpose, it is for the study of Islamic system, right? So Hindu, you have seen in 1776 Code of Jendu laws. Then Calcutta Madrasa, guys, Calcutta Madrasa recently only, I think in 2017 they have asked this question, and in 1784 they started Asiatic Society of Bengal. Okay, so by William John, 1784, Asiatic Society of Bengal by William John. As its name indicate, it is to study the Asian societies, specifically India. So they were more concerned about India, but in general, study of Eastern society or Oriental studies. So this is mainly for Oriental studies means what? Study of Eastern societies, okay, Oriental societies. So more specifically, study of India. Okay, that's about Indology. And one more interesting fact with respect to Warren Hastings, he was the only Governor General who was tried for a murder case. Which case? There was a Bengali trader whose name was Nandakumar. Okay, and this Nandakumar accused Warren Hastings in a corruption charge or corruption case. Later, Nandakumar was hanged in a fabricated case, and in that case, Warren Hastings was tried, but without any evidence, lack of evidence, he was left free by the court. Okay, and then you will see there is one revenue settlement also which was tried during Warren Hastings' time. In fact, Warren Hastings' time was all about experiments. That is why the question which I've told you, this period is known as trial and error period. The revenue settlement which they have tried is like this. Later, now we are going to discuss about permanent settlement and connected to that other settlements also. But before that, just have an idea. They will not ask you this one. Warren Hastings tried a settlement. What is that? Zamindars on one side, they will collect the tax from the peasants and will pay to the state. See, the question here is, they when they came to India, when they started administration, they need to collect, but they have no idea how to collect or who will collect, from whom will collect, when to collect. Is it after the sowing or before the cultivation, or before the sowing or after the cultivation? Okay, when to collect, no idea. From whom to collect? Is it from the landlord or from the peasant? No idea. Okay, when, where, from who will collect, whether the zamindar or the official, no idea. How much to be collected, no idea. So that is why they have done some experiment, and all will culminate into permanent settlement in 1793, will be done by Lord Cornwallis. Okay, so here the experiment was like this. They decided that the zamindars will collect. From whom? From the peasants, and will pay to the state. But how the zamindar will be selected? The zamindar will be selected using a bidding process, an auction process. Okay, so there will be an auction process, and the zamindars, the aspiring zamindars, they will participate. Guys, people want to become zamindar at this point of time. The reason is there was no organized system of policing and all at this point of time, and zamindars used to enjoy some kind of, some power of policing. So people want to become zamindars. Firstly, they can exploit the peasants and they can take money. Secondly, they enjoy the power of policing also. Okay, so police reforms will come in 1793 during Cornwallis time. 1793 very important because permanent settlement, police reforms, judicial reforms, civil service reforms, everything coming in that year when Lord Cornwallis is going. That is the last year of Lord Cornwallis. Although later he will come, but for a few months, and he will die in India. But here, the settlement is like this. You will collect revenue from the peasants, will pay to the state. Who will collect? Zamindar. How the zamindar is selected? It is through auction process. So when there is an auction, what the zamindars will do? They are so desperate and they want to get the zamindariship at anyhow. So what they do? They will promise a very big amount to the state that we will be paying this much. Okay. So the state, what they will do? Those who quote the maximum amount during the bidding process will give the zamindariship. So let's suppose from some area, you can get 1 lakh as the maximum. But what these zamindars will do, they will say that I can collect around 5 lakh, and they promise 5 lakh. So they will get that. Okay. Now, once you promise that 5 lakh, you are supposed to pay that. But guys, here the problem is, even if you don't pay, there is not much punishment. No punishment or anything. You will lose the zamindariship. And this is for 5 years. This is what also known as quinquennial settlement or 5-year settlement. Okay. So when this is for 5 years, after the first year, no compulsion to pay. Second year, no compulsion to pay. So you can go till 5 years. Okay. So in 5 years, let's suppose you are able to collect 1 lakh. Now you promise 5 lakh, you pay 1 lakh, whatever you have collected honestly, and you don't even pay anything. Like you can even pay 10,000 and you can say that I was able to collect this only. What is the maximum that you're going to lose? You will lose the zamindariship. So what you will do, you will keep that 1 lakh with you. You may pay some 10,000 and you will say that I was able to collect this much only. Anyway, you're not going to pay 5 lakh. As long as you're not going to pay 5 lakh, which you have promised, you're not going to continue as a Zamindar. So will you pay 1 lakh which you have collected? No. So what happened? Even though the system was there, 5 years, something got blocked. The state is expecting 5 lakh over a period of 5 years. So 5 years state is getting nothing, 10,000. So state could not do anything, any policies or anything. So they suffered with this policy. Then what they did is this 5 year was changed to 1 year because they thought that this 5 year is making the big problem. But the Zamindars used to do the same thing, but now for 1 year. Why? Because the root cause is not 5 year or 1 year. The root cause is you are asking the Zamindar how much you will pay and they will give you an unrealistic amount. That was the problem. They're not able to solve the root cause. That is what going to be changed when it comes to permanent settlement in 1793. Okay, guys, we will discuss permanent settlement now. Anyway, I have told you this. So we will now skip. We are done with Lord, Warren Hastings. Cornwallis, permanent settlement. What is that? The main problem with respect to the quinquennial settlement, or the one which we have discussed, is what? It is related to that you are allowing the Zamindars to fix the revenue which is to be paid. But when it comes to permanent settlement, as its name indicate, they will make a permanent settlement, right? Like whatever revenue you pay in 1790, or the revenue will be fixed on the basis of 1790. That means now you're not telling the Zamindars or not asking the Zamindars how much you give me. They are fixing, the state is fixing the revenue that the Zamindar is supposed to collect from the peasant on the basis of 1790. So they fixed their revenue on the basis of 1790. Who fixed this? The state will fix this. Are you allowing the Zamindars to fix this? No. Now the state directly fixing the revenue which has to be paid by the peasant, and the same should be collected by the Zamindar. Okay. So this is what permanent settlement. System remain the same. Peasant will pay to the Zamindar. Zamindar will pay to the state. The system remain the same. Okay. But now it's not based on the advice or wish of the Zamindar. The state is fixing this is what you're supposed to collect and this is what exactly you need to collect. Okay, that means you should not collect more, right? This is the idea. But what the Zamindars will do over a period of time? Zamindars will keep on exploiting the peasants. Guys, something which is fixed on the base of 1790. Now what will happen over a period of time? The production will increase or decrease. Production will keep on increasing because of the material advances, the technological developments and all, right? So 1790, this was introduced in 1793 by Lord Cornwallis and John Shore, just note down, 1793, Cornwallis, John Shore, where in eastern part of India mainly, like, Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, and then some parts of Tamil Nadu and some parts of Benares. But mainly remember like this eastern part of India. Okay, by Lord Cornwallis, and who was his deputy, John Shore. And this guy is going to be the next Governor General, John Shore. But nothing much to discuss under John Shore except this one. Okay, so this one, the state will fix it. So that problem is solved. That root cause is actually solved. Now, what is the advantage for state now? The advantage for state is there is a predictability that this much amount, which is fixed by the state, that you're going to get. And they have introduced a law, which is called a sunset law in 1794. What is that law? It made binding on the Zamindar, like there will be a date which is fixed, and before that sunset on that day, you have to pay whatever is asked you to pay. If not, you will lose the Zamindariship. Zamindariship will be taken away. Okay, so that is what sunset law, 1794. Just write sunset law, 1794, made, Zamindar have to pay. Otherwise, Zamindariship will be taken away. Similarly, who is the owner of the land here? Ownership is with the Zamindar. Ownership is with the Zamindar means as long as peasants pay the tax, you will continue. If you're not paying the tax, you will be evicted by the Zamindar. That is a system. Okay. So ownership is given to the, and why, what Zamindar will get here? Now, during 1793, police reform is there, police officials were appointed. I'll discuss that separately, but now they're not going to enjoy that power. Now they are going to get some commission, right? What is the commission they're going to get? 9% commission they will get. And they're working for this 9%. So state is asking you to collect, let's suppose state is asking you to collect 100 rupee. How much you will get? 9 rupee you will get. And how much you need to give it to state? 91 you need to give it to state. Or you can put it in this way, 10 by 11 to the state, 1 by 11 to the zamindar. So sometimes in option you will get like that, because that was I just made it into percentage. Actually 10 by 11 and 1 by 11. Write that, okay? 91 to the state. Okay. Suppose you are asking to collect 100 rupee. Do you have the right to collect more? No. You don't have the right to collect more. It's not that you collect more and give us 91%. No. It's that you are supposed to collect this only. This is fixed by the state. Now, does this make peasant in an advantageous position? Yes, because zamindar should not exploit. And over a period of time, what will happen? The production will increase and the tax remain the same. So who should be getting the benefit here? The peasants should be getting the benefit. But are they getting it? No. Why? Because zamindars used to charge more. Suppose they have asked to collect 100, but they keep on increasing that 150, 200, 300, etc. So they keep on exploiting as long as the production increasing. So the peasants are not enjoying any benefit. Now, when they collect more, is the state is getting benefited? No. Why? Because state is asking you to collect 100. If you are collecting 200 and if you're offering a share of 91% to state, you're supposed to give 182. The state will be happy, but state is asking you to collect 100 only. And if you're collecting 200, that is illegal. You are prohibited. You are not allowed to do that. So what they do, even if they collect 200, they have obligation to pay 91 to the state, and they were asked to collect 100 for 9 for them. Now what they do, 91 they will pay to the state, and how much balance? 109. They will keep it with themselves. So who is getting benefit here? It is zamindars who's getting the benefit, neither the state nor the peasant. This was the problem. Apart from this, there are many other problems with this, but let's not get into that. Consequences is not important for you in prelims. Consequences are like high rate of taxation. Then the zamindars will be maybe evicted under sunset law. Once they evict, what will happen? New zamindar will come. They will be looking for this 9% commission, and they may be urban merchant or like that, or a businessman or a trader. So that lead to absentee landlordism. And they may appoint some other people to collect also. That lead to chain of intermediaries, and exploitation will increase. Money lenders will come, high rate of taxation, high interest rate, and that lead to poverty, disguised unemployment, because all these people who lost the land, they will come back to the land again as a agricultural labor. So labor supply is increasing. That means disguised unemployment. What is disguised unemployment? Marginal productivity is zero. For example, 1 acre of land, 5 people are working. Whatever they produce, what more if 10 people are coming can produce? Nothing more, right? So 5 people who whatever is produced in the 1 acre of land, even 5 more is added, their marginal productivity is zero. So what is disguised unemployment? Marginal productivity will be zero. Okay, or you can say underemployment or unemployment. All these are same, one the same. You can put it in that way. So I hope you're clear with that. Like, what are the facts which you need to remember here? Who introduced? Cornwallis and John Shaw. Where? Eastern part. Remember in that way. That will be better for you. Okay, eastern part means Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, parts of Tamil Nadu, parts of Benares. Okay, and then what percentage of total India? It comes around 19% of total India. Just let me confirm it. 1 second. Yeah, it comes around 19% of British India. What do you mean by British India? Total India, in that wherever British have main control, right? Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, that area. Some princely states are there. We are excluding that. So 19% of British India, that percentage of area. Then commission we have discussed, sunset law we have discussed. Who's the owner? Zamindar is the owner. Ownership is given to the Zamindar as long as Zamindar pay the tax. Okay. So that's about permanent settlement. Guys, am I audible so far? Any problem is there with the mic or anything? Video? In case if there is a problem in mic, I need to turn off the video. That's why. Can anyone just clarify?
No problem, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, even though when I've told you that ownership, it is not absolute ownership, that is clear, right? When I say ownership between peasant and zamindar is the owner, but state versus zamindar, state is the owner. That's why under sunset law, state can evict you. Otherwise, if you are the absolute owner, state can't do anything, right? Now, what about Riotwari settlement? As we have discussed zamindari, we will discuss about Riotwari settlement also. Okay, it was mainly introduced in south and central region. First one was in eastern part. Guys, if you have any confusion whether permanent settlement was replaced with Riotwari and Riotwari replaced with Mahalwari, because we discuss in that way, right? It is not the case. Something which is going on in eastern part, that is permanent settlement. This is something which is going on in south and central part. Okay, and something which is going on in northern part, that is Mahalwari settlement. All these are going simultaneously, parallelly it is going on. It's not that one is replaced with the other. Okay, so this one, Riotwari settlement in the south, like that means in Madras and Bombay. This is mainly in Madras and Bombay, and the central provinces with the capital Nagpur, right? So these are the areas where, that means this cover maximum area. More than half, around 51% of total area will be covered with this. 51% of British India will be covered with this. So we have discussed about the first one, 19%, this one 51%, so rest will be 30%, right? 70 is over, 30%, that will be Mahalwari settlement. So who introduced this Riotwari settlement? 2017 question, direct question, Thomas Munro and Reed. Okay, Thomas Munro and Reed. Where I've told you, south and central part. Madras, okay guys, Madras involved huge area, right? Some entire Tamil Nadu, some areas of Kerala, some areas of Karnataka, and then Bombay also, it comprises of too much of area, right? So huge area, that's why around 51% it will come. Okay. Now here, the problem with permanent settlement is that is permanently settled. Here, that's not the case. Here, it's like for 20 years, it will be fixed. And after 20 years, the state may change it like that. So this is not permanent settlement. And here, the system is like this. System is more important. Earlier, zamindar will collect from the peasant, will pay to the state. Here, there is no middleman. Like here, the peasant, the zamindar was a middleman in this system, permanent system, right? But here, instead of zamindar who used to collect, they appoint an official for that. There will be a British official who will be not necessarily British official. There will be an official which will be who will be appointed for collecting the revenue. So that is a change. So peasant will directly pay to the official. He will pay to the state. So to an extent, that exploitation of zamindar will come down because you know, now the problem like absentee landlordism, chain of intermediaries and all will not come, right? Because your job is to collect tax and you're getting paid for that salary. So you will not appoint any other person for that. So that problem is not there. But this high rate of taxation and all is still there. Money lenders, a high interest rate, exploitation, all these problems are there. But the system is very important. Who introduced is important. Who introduced? Thomas Munro and Reed, where south and center, Madras, Bombay, and central provinces. Year is not important because it is introduced in different phases, 1805, 1817, right? Like that, 1818, firstly in 1805 and then 1817, 1818 in Bombay region. Like that, year is not important here. Who introduced, where it is introduced, what percentage area, what is the system. This is what you need to know. Okay. Then the next one is Mahalwari settlement. Mahalwari settlement means there, instead of that British official, the Panchayat will act as a middleman. That means the Panchayat will collect the tax. Okay. Mahal, it's a Punjabi word. Its meaning is actually village. Okay. So the village will collect the tax. Village means the Panchayat. Village Panchayat will collect the tax. So peasant will pay to the panchayat, panchayat will pay to the state. Who introduced this? Holt Mackenzie. Where? In northern part of India, like Punjab and western UP, that region. What percentage of area? First one 19, second one 51, so balance 30% of area. Who introduced? Holt Mackenzie. Where? Northern part. What percentage? 30%. What is the system? Peasant to the panchayat to the state. Okay, who's the owner? Peasant is the owner. Second one, Rotwari system. Who's the owner? Peasant is given the ownership. Okay, first one, who's the owner? Zamindar is the owner. So when the peasant is given ownership, guys, there is another problem here. You are the owner of the land. So you can pledge your land to the money lender. So the chances of losing that land is very high. So the chances of emergence of money lenders is so high, right? And in Rotwari regions, you can see money lenders have emerged. This Marwadis and Mahajans and all, they are the outsiders. They started coming to this Deccan region, and they started grabbing all the lands, and finally the outsiders become the insiders. Outsiders grabbed all the lands in that area. One of the reasons for Deccan riots is this one. Okay, but we don't want to get into that. I hope this part is clear. Okay, now Cornwallis time. 3 reforms we need to discuss. One related to civil service, then police reform, then judicial reform. Police reform, nothing was there. Till then, there was no organized system of policing. Zamindars used to enjoy the power of policing. Now they started, police reform. That means police officials were appointed formally, and they will be given salary like that to, protect the law and order situation. Guys, there are a lot of positives with respect to British rule in India. Like the law and order situation in India improved drastically during British time. You will see that police reforms, and you will see some acts like anti-Thuggee law. The laws like anti-Thuggee law means which was passed by Lord William Bentinck. Okay, Lord William Bentinck passed this law. Who are thugs? Thugs are the armed robbers. They hide in jungles and they used to loot and attack and kill the people, the traders, the business people when they travel in that area. Very common problem in northern part of India, and the thugs got suppressed after this law. And they have had some policies like if you allow a criminal to hide in a village, the entire village will be punished. This kinds of policies they have followed. So obviously the law and order situation in India improved drastically during British time. Okay, that is one of the positives. Guys, a lot of positives are there that we will have to take a discussion when it comes to mains point of view. At this time, it is not required with respect to education, with respect to connectivity, railway, post and telegraph. Okay, and a lot of socio-religious reforms like Anti-Sati resolution. Then you will see Widow Remarriage Act, Universal Marriage Act, ban on human infanticide, ban on female infanticide, human sacrifice. A lot of good things are there. Okay. So here, police reform, just remember this, police officials were appointed, police stations were established. But when I say police stations were established, right, very specifically, police stations were established on the basis of area. Normally what it should be on the basis of population. But police stations were established on the basis of area. Okay, so no need to have any confusion before they have asked this question. And if you find it is on the basis of population, that's a wrong answer. Nowadays, on the basis of population, it has to be. Logically, it should be on the basis of population. More population, more police stations required, right? It should not be like area. In area, maybe even 10 people are there in one area. You cannot have a police station like that. Okay, that's about police reform. Civil service reform, again, nothing. He introduced civil services. But the civil services not for Indians at this point of time. Indians started entering into civil services post 1833. There was a provision in 1833 Charter Act that no discrimination should be made in the recruitment of civil service on the basis of sex, color, creed, place of birth, etc. But technically, Indians started entering into civil service exam after 1853. I'll come to that. Okay, so that's about civil services. It's just about introduction of civil service. Who introduced it? Lord Cornwallis. Who's known as the father of civil service? Lord Cornwallis. Direct question, 2015. Okay, 2015 or 2014. I don't remember exactly the year, but directly they have asked this question. So that's about this reforms during 1793 during the period of Lord Cornwallis. Other things that you can see in Cornwallis are mainly from mains point of view, but we skip that. We will focus mainly from prelims at this point of time. Then, what do you mean by subsidiary alliance, guys? Who introduced subsidiary alliance? If the question was about who introduced this or whose brainchild is this, it is a French governor, Dupleix. Okay, so he introduced that policy, or his idea is what? Subsidiary alliance. Subsidiary alliance means like if king is facing some threats from outsiders. Okay, so his kingdom is facing some threat, his state is facing some threat, so what he will do, he will ask for military help. Okay, this is what subsidiary alliance, like the Britishers are providing military help to them to protect from the external threat. So what is subsidiary alliance? It's just a military help. It is just a military help. Who introduced? Dupleix. But here I'm going to discuss under which Governor General context, you know, right? Lord Wellesley. Why we are discussing it under Wellesley? Because Wellesley made use of subsidiary alliance extensively and made it very popular. He signed this treaty with so many, local kings forcefully also, not voluntarily. Normally, subsidiary alliance should come voluntarily or forcefully. It should be voluntarily, right? When you face a threat, you approach the Europeans, you seek the military help, so they will protect you. And when they protect you, you will have to take care of their army because they are giving you the army, so you'll have to feed them. Like that is there. So this is just a military help. What Wellesley did, Wellesley signed this treaty with many local kings, even forcefully also, not only voluntarily. Why he did that? Why he did that is because across India, now with each king he's signing the treaty and he's keeping his military across India. So the idea is, there is no idea of annexation at this point of time because they were happy with whatever they had at that point of time. Annexation, their mindset is changing after 1813. So far, no. Okay. But this policy actually helped them in annexation later. So far, there is no idea of annexation for them. Whatever they have, they're happy with that. The idea of annexation will come after 1813 Charter Act during Hastings time. I'll come to that. So what I'm talking about is during Wellesley time, he signed this treaty with many, like he signed it with Awadh, then Sindh, then Hyderabad, Mysore. Okay, the idea is to keep the army across. Secondly, you can mobilize a huge army across India without spending anything from your exchequer, because entire expenditure will be taken care by the local king. These are the conditions, and there were some conditions also. Remember these conditions. They can ask you which among the following were the conditions under subsidiary alliance. Guys, the first one is, if you sign this treaty, you cannot employ any foreigners in your army other than English. That is the first one. So if you sign this treaty, you cannot employ any foreigners other than English in your setup. Second, if you sign this treaty, in case if there is any war treaty or peace treaty, you will have to inform it firstly to the British. Okay, inform is a word which is very diplomatically used. In fact, you need to get the permission from the British. Now, when you are signing a treaty with some neighboring kingdoms and you need to get the permission from the British, don't you think that you're surrendering the sovereignty? You are signing this treaty means effectively you're surrendering the sovereignty. And that's the reason why Tipu never wanted to sign this treaty. Mysore was forced to sign the treaty, but Tipu never signed the treaty. Instead, he went for a war, the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. And he died in that war. And after the death of Tipu, Mysore signed the treaty. So Mysore signed the treaty 1799, but after the death of Tipu. Tipu was forced to sign, he never signed. He fought against it. Why? Because you are surrendering the sovereignty. And that's the reason why many historians understand and wrote Tipu's death as an honorable death than a dishonorable pact. Okay? Honorable death than a dishonorable pact. Guys, I've seen many people who are writing. There is no point in discussing this in detail at this point of time because nothing relevant for prelims here. Because whatever is required for prelims, I've told you 1799 Mysore signed and after the war and everything. But if they give you this question, Tipu's death in history is understood as an honorable death than a dishonorable pact, discuss. I've seen many people discussing about different causes of Anglo-Mysore War and how Tipu fought and all these technological advancements he brought in and how he challenged the British and everything. Nobody discuss about subsidiary alliance. What is that dishonorable pact we are talking about in the question? Subsidiary alliance. Okay, so he never wanted to sign that. That is the reason why Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. There are obvious many other reasons also, but this question, which was there were other states as well. I don't remember exactly the order. That you need to check that order. Sindh was in 1803. Awadh was there in between. Awadh in 1801. Mysore in 1799, 1798. In between, there are some other states also. Okay, but these are important states that we are discussing. Travancore also signed in between. Okay. So I hope you understood. Okay, we were talking about that points. 2 points I've discussed, the conditions. And then the third one was related to if you sign this treaty, an English resident had to be stationed in that local state which signed the treaty, and the entire expenditure of that English resident had to be taken care by the local king. Means his army, his guards, his dress, his food, and every expenditure has to be taken care by the local king who signed the treaty. So these are the commitments that the local king have to make. Like you should not employ any foreigners. You have to inform it with the British in case if there is any treaty. Okay, and then an English resident had to be stationed. In return, they promised that British promised that they will not interfere in the internal matters, which they never did or hardly did, and they will protect it from outsiders. But what they did, they started annexing these states. Awadh signed the treaty 1801. Awadh was annexed later 1856. One of the reasons for 1857 revolt, most important reason, annexation of Awadh. Okay. Secondly, they have signed the treaty with Sindh 1803. Exactly after 40 years, 1843, Sindh was annexed. And guys, the Governor General at that point of time, I think Lord Ellenborough, and the person who was responsible for annexation of Sindh, his name was Charles Napier. This guy, Charles Napier, have written a letter to the Governor General by telling that what we do is not something which we are supposed to do. The words that he used like this, we don't have any right to annex Sindh, and still we do it. And what a piece of rascality it will be. This is what exactly he wrote to the Governor General. Okay, so that they are very clear that they don't have any right to annex Sindh, and still they are doing it. Okay, why they don't have any right to annex Sindh? Because they have the obligation to protect Sindh. Why? Under subsidiary alliance. Okay, so I hope that you got it clear. Subsidiary alliance. What facts we need to know from prelims point of view? Who introduced it? Whose brainchild is it? Dupleix, a French governor, when he rendered his army to Hyderabad way back in 1740s. Okay, but Wellesley made some changes. These 5 points that I've discussed are the changes which has been made by Wellesley. Otherwise, Dupleix is given it as a military help. You give the army, and some of the expenses of the army will be taken care by the local king, and some amount will be paid to the French. That's the situation. But now, some conditions, they are forced to sign. All these things are there. I hope that point is clear. That's about subsidiary alliance. Okay. Now, the most important one which I need to discuss is Lord Minto's time. Minto, 2 Mintos are there. Lord Minto 1 is coming now from 1807 to 1813. Okay. Guys, another Minto is also coming. You can see history repeats, right? Exactly after 100 years. You will study Minto Morley reform, 1909. Here, this Minto is also during the same time, almost 1807 to 1809, 1813, that time is there. 1813, the Charter Act will be during his time. 1909, exactly after 100 years, another Minto will come. Okay. Similarly, 1757, Battle of Plassey, 1857, revolt, 100 years, 1947, 90 years, independence, right? So 1877, this guy, Lord Lytton, passed this Vernacular Press Act. 77, 78, during that time. Okay. Similarly, exactly after 100 years during national emergency, similar kind of restrictions were imposed on the newspapers by Indira Gandhi. So even Indira Gandhi was actually compared with Lord Lytton at that point of time. Very cruel Governor General. Okay. So here, what I want to discuss now is with respect to Lord Minto, the Charter Act of 1813. But before I discuss about Charter Act of 1813, the one which I've missed out is the Pitt's India Act of 1784. Quickly, you can you can learn that also. 1784 Pitt's India Act. 1773 Regulating Act we have done. 1784 Pitt's India Act. What happened is 1773. What I've discussed. Governor General of Bengal plus 4. Majority was the problem, right? So what they have done here is Governor General of Bengal plus 4 made to 3. Guys, you will see this 4, then 3, then will be increased to 4 in 1833. Don't be confused here. Why they are making it to 3, I'll tell you the logic so that you can remember easily. They made it to 3 to solve that problem of majority. But how they're going to solve the problem of majority? That is very interesting, right? Because out of 5, if you're not going to get the majority of 3, out of 4, how you're going to get the majority of 3 now? Even one member is gone, but net is how many? 4, because Governor General plus 3. What is the majority in 4? 3. 2 is equality. This 3 was the majority in case of 5 also. But how you're going to ensure majority now? Now the provision is, in case if there is equality, Governor General will have a final say, casting vote. No veto. Veto and casting vote is different. Veto means if entire 3 or 4 are against you, still you go with your own decision. That is what veto. Okay. Casting vote means in case of equality, you can have one more vote. So here, 4 members are there. Getting a tie means what? Governor General just need the support of any one out of 3. That you can anyway get, right? Either you can, anyway you can appease him by money or by any means you can appease him. Imagine if you're not getting support of at least one member, then it will be difficult. If you get the support of one member, then you can use your casting vote. Effectively, he had 2 votes. Simple. So he had 2 votes and one more you get. So it will become 3. Then others, no problem. So that's how they solve this problem. So casting vote. Okay. But again, as I've told you, their control of parliament over the company keep on increasing. Now, second provision is very important, guys. They have introduced something called as board of control. So there will be a board of control with 6 members, and they will be sitting in England and will regulate the affairs of East India Company in India. What is the first one? First one, the council members, they will come to India, will be appointed by the parliament and will regulate the affairs of Governor General and the company sitting in India. Board of control will sit in England and will regulate the affairs of East India Company in India. Okay. I hope that is clear. And next one, there will be a provision for recall. What is that? Recall means I've told you Governor General is appointed by the company. Members are parliament. So if the members are appointed by the crown or the parliament, they can recall any point of time. No issue. But through this provision of recall, even the Governor General can be recalled by the parliament. Okay. So parliament can recall any of its official, including Governor General. Why I'm making it very specific? Because the Governor General is appointed by the company. So through this, he can also be recalled by the parliament. Okay. Then that's about 1813 Charter Act. Okay. So the impact is very important, but the impact we don't want to discuss in prelims. They will ask you consequences and impact in the mains only. What is the main impact? Main impact is it led to deindustrialization in India. Why deindustrialization? Okay. Sorry, I thought I was discussing 1813 Charter Act. We have just completed 1784 Pitt's India Act. Okay, now 1813 Charter Act. 1813 Charter Act, guys, there are 2 provisions, which was again asked in last year or last to last year. The 2 provisions related to end of monopoly of East India Company. Okay, by this time, more and more companies and industries are coming in England, and they are looking for markets and they are looking for raw materials and all those things. So East India Company is just one company from England, right? So the other company is also looking for markets. So till now, East India Company used to enjoy monopoly. They keep on bribing the parliamentarians and they are enjoying the monopoly in India. Okay, so now the others are also started bribing the parliamentarians and they passed this 1813 Charter Act in their favor so that they can also come and enter in Indian markets. So the first provision of this is monopoly of East India Company ended, except in two. What are they? Trade in tea product and trade with China. So except in these two, the monopoly of East India Company over. Okay, that means what? Other companies can now come to India, they can establish trade and they can take raw materials and they can sell their products and all with India. It's considered as good if new situation because we are demanding FDIs and all, but that time it was not the case. That's the consequences part, guys. That led to deindustrialization in India. How? Because the products, Indian products have suffered a lot because these finished products which are coming out of industries and made by machines, this Manchester cloth and Liverpool clothes and all these things are not at all, Indian products are not at all competitive with them in terms of quality and in terms of price and in terms of the effort that these people are put in. So, it's not, they're not getting that money also, right? So people started shifting to buy those products because that is more good, they're more finished, more cheap as well. So what happened? The artisan's life was totally ruined. And there is no further scope of development of industries also in India. Till then, guys, India, we had a balanced setup. During Mughals time, industry, the artisans and agriculture, we had a balanced setup. But now there is no further scope of development of industries in India because of this. And that is the reason why even now also, if you take industry setup, we had very less contribution from industry in GDP. Okay, national income, we have very less contribution. Once we got independence and once we started changing the policies, then service sector came and service sector started dominating. Otherwise, it should be like in the reverse way, agriculture, industry, and like that it should go. But what happened? We got dominated by service sector because of post-independence policies and all. But that was the time of service sector. But there should be a middle phase where industry should do well. But we didn't get that phase, right? So that is the reason why there is a total imbalance in India when it comes to industry. Because what is the root cause? Even now, when you talk about why industrialization is not there, why industries are not doing good, why we need this manufacturing policy and all these things, you write your answer even in your general studies or essay or wherever you're getting start from 1813 Charter Act, because that led to deindustrialization that stopped or prevented the development of industries in India. And that's the root cause why we don't have a vibrant industrial growth even now also. I hope that point is very clear. Okay, that's the main impact. Second impact is actually going to happen during the next Governor General. Next Governor General is Lord Hastings, 1813 to 23. Guys, what you need to do is you can read Spectrum. Everything is there, whatever I'm discussing in that order. Order may be different, or NCERT. If you need to refer something more, like whatever I'm discussing here, it is actually taken from Muhammad Tariq Khan, TMS book. Okay, so if not, you get time to read the entire book. It's hardly 100, 150, 200 pages are there. Everything will be covered. Just towards the end, you will see that synopsis. Everything is there. Even in Spectrum, also all these things are there. You can go through anything. That is why I'm not making you to write, or I am also not writing. Everything that I'm discussing is there. You just need to connect it. Okay, all these Charter Act and Quits India Act and everything is there, impact and everything is there. Okay, so what are the three acts that we have discussed? 73 Regulating Act, 84 Quits India Act. Quits India Act, 3 points are clear: Governor General of Bengal plus 3, then Board of Control, and then provision of recall. 1773 Regulating Act is clear. Here, 1813 Charter Act, 1 point I've discussed, that is related to end of monopoly. Second point is related to education. And this is their first effort towards education. This also was asked in prelims as well as in mains. Anyway, they will ask you education related question. Prelims also they have asked. What is that? The company was directed to spend rupees 1 lakh for the purpose of betterment of education in those areas where they have control. Okay. So that is related to Charter Act of 1813. I hope it is clear. the other impact that I was discussing, but I just skipped it because the other impact is like this only, guys. During Hastings' time, there was a change in policy, shift in policy. Before, when I have discussed about subsidiary alliance, I've told you that, whatever they have, they were happy with that. But now they come up with the 1813 Charter Act. So more and more companies are now going to come to India, right? So when more and more companies are going to come to India, there will be competition. So what you need now, you are looking for more markets for that, so that you can sell your products, and you need raw materials also. So for this reason, they felt that they need to have a political control in these regions. When you need to have this political control, they started capturing these areas. So what I want to tell you is, after 1813 Charter Act, one of the other impact of 1813 Charter Act is they started annexing more and more and more areas. Okay, so they started annexation now, and this annexation will continue till 1857. And in the Queen's Proclamation, she will make a. This is for British company. This is British companies. Okay, now after 1857, in 1857, in Queen's Proclamation, she make a proclamation that no further annexation. So till then, now 1813 onwards, there will be annexations. You will see Dalhousie come up with doctrine of lapse, and so many states will be annexed in different reasons. Annexation of Awadh for misgovernance, annexation of Sindh, okay, and so many wars will be fought. Punjab, Anglo-Punjab War, okay. So you will see a lot of annexations during this time. That is also impact of 1813 Charter Act. Guys, what we can do now is we can take a 15-minute break, and then we will continue. Okay, just take 15-minute break and come back at 7:15. Okay. Okay, guys, 7:15 we'll start.